All right, what's up, everybody? This is Cody, aka DFS Prodigy, coming to you live with special guest DFS by the numbers. Y'all probably know him. He's definitely high in the rankings with the UFC caliber videos. I'm excited to have him on and excited to break down this card. Well, how do you feel about this card, my man?
I think it's interesting. Obviously, when we only have 10 fights, it kind of makes you sit back and think,
Yeah,
maybe I don't want to go heavy on this card, but it's a big card. I think a lot of these fights are going to score well. I think the score is going to be pretty high overall, and I'm probably going to go heavy on it. So hopefully it works out. I think the card's fine from a DFS perspective, and I like a lot from a betting perspective as well.
of course. So, like usual, we're gonna break it down fight by fight, how Draftkings has it. This is obviously not the first fight of the night, but before we begin, like always, definitely check out his YouTube page, which I'll add that in the description below. With DFS by the numbers, always like this video and definitely subscribe. That helps me out a ton. Now let's dig into this card for UFC 260. So, DraftKings has it as Azatar versus Barry Alt. How do you feel about this fight?
Yeah, it's a tough fight. I mean, very level fight. Barrio 0-3 in the UFC technically, but he did look good in his last fight against Bahota, getting the knockout win. Of course, that win did not count because he popped for something. And speaking of popping for something, we haven't seen Abu Azazi for almost 3 years because he did pop for something. So kind of a crap shoot to start off the card. Honestly, I feel like this could go either way. I'm going to slightly go with Barrio because although he's losing to these guys like Andrew Sanchez, guys like that, he's competitive with them. So I'm going to go with Barrio. But I think an interesting aspect of this fight is I think it's going to go really underlooked. I feel like not many people are going to play this. It's the first fight of the night. People don't like the first fight of the night. So for that reason, I'm kind of interested in playing a little bit of both sides here, just in case there is that finish. And if you saw the weigh-ins today, it kind of looks like they're going to go after it in the fight here. So I'm kind of thinking about going a little bit of both sides just in case there is that finish. But if this was like a 13 fight slate or a 14 fight slate, I'd probably have 0. But since we only have 10 fights, you got to kind of probably mix a little bit in there.
Especially given that they're in the 8K range, that's where kind of the pieces of the meat is for this card. Basically, it's always the 8K range, and given that Burial is 8,200 and Azatar is 8,000, you got to pick one of the two. I think in GBPs, it's going to have to be the first fight of the night. Is definitely going to be a piece of your lineup that you're going to want because one of these guys is going to go off. One of them is going to hit the body shot, and it's basically going to get you those knockout points. So, I mean, I think it's a decent fight overall. The problem is Azatar hasn't fought in 3 years. But then again, he's still training. We know he's still training. We know he's still made improvements since then. Burial, that's the problem is I don't think he's made improvements since that fight, since losing those 3 fights. That's the issue of what I'm looking at. I think Azatar has the body shot to definitely knock him out. I think he has the volume to get you there. Do I think Burial can easily win this because Azatar hasn't fought in a while? Yeah, I do. I can definitely see it. We've seen the layoffs hurt a lot of people, obviously, so far in the UFC. The layoffs have not been in anybody's favor, in my opinion. So this is a 50-50 fight, in my opinion. I'm slightly on Azatar just because I know he's active right now. I know he's made improvements. I know he's been training, but I could see you get to Burial. I think this is a good fight for the starting with the card on a not as so great UFC 260 like we thought it was going to be. So I can see both sides, like you were saying, man.
I like it.
So Stipe Myokitch versus Francis Nagano. How do you feel about this main event, my man? I'm excited to see how you feel.
I'm nervous for this fight.
Yep.
I can't stop thinking about this fight.
Yep.
This fight it's something else because we know that Stipe, he's probably the better fighter. He's more well-rounded, but Francis Ngannou has that X factor, and that X factor is that power. And I don't know, I feel the same way. I feel 50-50. I think 2 things are going to happen. Either Francis Ngannou is able to knock out Stipe Miocic in the first round, or I think Stipe is going to kind of implement the same game plan as he did in that first fight. And I feel like both are kind of likely here. So for this, I'm going to, on a 10-fight slate, I'm more of a 150 max guy. You said you're more of like a 20 max guy. In 150 lineups, I'm going to have all 150 lineups with either one of these guys in there. I was thinking of maybe cutting it right down the middle, 50-50. But since Stipe is a little bit cheaper at 7,800, I'm thinking of maybe going 55 in favor of Stipe and 45 for Ngannou there. But I do know this is going to score well. Either Ngannou does get that first round knockout, scores a ton of points, or Stipe in their first fight scored like 140. So I think both scenarios are likely. As far as picking a winner, I'll go Stipe. But honestly, I feel nervous about that pick for sure.
Yeah, so the reasoning behind why I like Stipe slightly more is because the price value, for one. The 7,800 is definitely a value for a DraftKings slate. If you're a guy like me, if you play 3 to 20 lineups here and there, you're going to want that value at 7,800. You're going to want the main event. Obviously, this is a 5-round fight. You're going to want this main event definitely on this card. It's a lock, in my opinion, to have one of the two guys. The thing is, I like the wrestling of Stipe, who I think if he can out grapple and out wrestle Francis, this is his fight to win, in my opinion. If the cardio is definitely there, also in Stipe's background, where I think Francis needs that first round knockout in order to pay off that salary at 8,400 and to get the win. If it's going to go to the second or third round, I think this is Stipe's fight in the making. But the thing is, it's such a close fight, in my opinion, that it's hard to judge because we know the history between these two guys. They can go 50-50. So I can see you want Francis with the knockout. I can see you want the wrestling aspect of Myokitch. So I can see both sides of this fight. Do you like the grappling of Stipe, in your opinion, or no?
Yeah, so in the first fight, I believe he took Francis Ngannou down 6 times. In the first round, it was a little bit harder to. I think he got him down 2 times in the first round, but Stipe really had to work, and so did Francis Ngannou had to work as well. So I think the takedowns will come, maybe not in the first round, but I do think as the fight goes on, the takedowns will for sure come and add up for sure.
For sure. So I cannot wait to watch this fight. I think this is going to be a hell of a fight, to be honest with you.
Dude, I can't wait. I mean, the pay-per-view as a whole is maybe not that strong, but I don't mind paying $70 to watch this fight. It's the biggest baddest rematch.
But to pay $70 for this fight and the co-main event and Woodley and Luque. Yeah. Go ahead and start me off on this brutal co-main event.
Yeah, brutal in a way. I feel like you're right. It could be brutal because a lot of Woodley fights are brutal and awful. But on the flip side, you look at Luque's fights, and his fights are always fun. They're always wars. So who's going to implement their style in this fight? And I like Luque a lot in this fight. I do think he wins based off of just throwing more volume. But no, it's an intriguing fight, as Woodley's taken a massive step down in competition, fighting guys like Gilbert Burns, Covington, Usman, to going to Vicente Luque. But if Woodley does not throw volume, how's he going to win a fight? Is he going to knock out Luque, which it's possible because Luque is very hittable. But to knock out somebody, you got to throw strikes. And I don't know what Woodley's going to show up. I think Luque's going to invite a war to Tyron Woodley. I just don't know if he's going to accept that invite. I don't know if he's going to, come forward and bang with Luque like Luque once, or I don't know if Woodley's going to, go back to the cage, back up, shell up, and let Luque unload on a 20-30 punch combo and get him out of there. So I like Luque from a DraftKings perspective. It's interesting because if Luque does not get an early finish, does it pay off the 9,100? Maybe. You take a look at Luque's scores, and he scores pretty dang good. I mean, averaging 92.2 DraftKings points, and that is counting some losses as well. So Luque does have a decent ceiling, I think, but he probably needs to get a knockout to end up on the optimal lineup, which it could happen. And as far as Woodley goes, I know he's looked awful, but he's looked awful against some really good competition. And if Woodley does win, I do think it's by knockout, but the problem for me is Luque's never been knocked out. Very good chin. But I will have some Woodley at 7,100. If I'm doing 150 max lineups, I'm probably putting maybe 15% Woodley, 20% Woodley, because if he does win, I do think it scores well, but I'm not overly confident. I'm going to go with the Luque side as far as
See, I want Luque in this fight really badly, but like you said, the 9,100 price tag is tough to get to. But I can see why you want it, because if he gets Woodley against that cage, he's going to knock him out in a flurry of punches. It's going to happen. Even though Woodley's durable, I know he is. But if Luque gets to him on top and gets him against that cage, this is Luque's fight to win, in my opinion. So Woodley, yeah, he's been durable. Yeah, he's the former champion. The name value definitely is there. I think that people who don't really do much research is going to want Woodley because it's the name value. It's Tyron Woodley. We know everybody knows who he is. Nobody knows who Luque is. Plain and simple. But the deal is, I can see Woodley either going into this fight not caring and just kind of going with his emotions, or he's going to go into this fight thinking this is his last fight possibly for the UFC. I'm going to go out there and show why I deserve another contract. That's what the problem is in my mind is, what if Woodley goes out there guns blazing thinking he's out of the UFC and he needs to win this fight? That's my only issue for having Luque at the 9,100 price tag. Do I think he's viable? I definitely think he's viable. But then again, like I said, I just don't know how the mindset Woodley's going to be. That's my issue. But I like Luque from a betting perspective. I don't like him as much from DraftKings, but from a betting perspective, I'll take Luque any day of this fight.
Yeah, definitely agree. I mean, we don't know like what Woodley's going to show up. We just don't know. But
we don't know.
We'll definitely speak. Yeah.
Going to the Sean O'Malley versus Almeida fight. How do you like this one, my man?
Yeah, I think O'Malley is going to be one of the higher owned plays on the slate because for one, he's O'Malley, and I think this is a pretty favorable matchup for him just because of the fact that Almeida, he's very chinny and he relies on his chin a lot. The dude's been knocked down 7 times in the UFC. He's been knocked out twice. And we all know O'Malley has some decent power. I just have some concerns from O'Malley. I mean, we saw him, drop the ball in his last fight against Marlon Vera. I have concerns about the durability, about the legs of O'Malley. I think if Almeida does go to the legs early, he could win. But I kind of see O'Malley knocking him out early, and I think O'Malley not too high, always high owned, but I'm probably going to have a decent amount myself. As far as a pump plate goes, 7,000 Almeida is not the worst option in the world. I think if he does win, it's probably by finish. I think someone's getting finished in this fight regardless, but I do lean towards the O'Malley side. If I'm doing 150 max, I'm probably having O'Malley in 45% of those fights or those lineups, and then Almeida like 10, 15%, 20% in the lineups as well. But overall, going to be pretty high on it, and I think it's a pretty exciting fight on the card.
I think this is a really exciting fight also, especially seeing Almeida in the weigh-ins, how he looked at Sean O'Malley at the end, that I think he's going to want a piece of Sean O'Malley. I think that he's going to want to prove to everybody why he can beat Sean O'Malley, but the only way he can if he uses those leg kicks. That's what he needs. He doesn't use them very much, but he needs the leg kicks because we know Sean O'Malley, his legs are not there. Everybody knows in the UFC that Sean O'Malley's legs, 3 out of the 4 fights, they've gotten hurt. So that's the issue, is if Almeida can use the leg kicks to his advantage, I think he definitely has this fight in his favor, especially at 7,000 as a punt option, like you were saying. I can see Almeida getting a win in this fight. And like I said, if he goes straight for the legs, if he doesn't and he just overthinks this fight, it's Sean O'Malley's fight to win. So I like this fight overall from a DraftKings perspective. I think one of the guys is going to have a finish. I think one of the guys is going to be really high scoring. If Sean O'Malley gets the win, it's going to be in the first round. If Almeida gets the win, there's your basically lock of the night at 7,000 as an underdog. So I like both sides of this fight, but I lean Sean O'Malley because I think the power is definitely there, given that Almeida also doesn't have a lot of volume when he does fight. But I do, the reason why I like Sean O'Malley is just because of that power that he carries in his hands.
I like it. Should be a fun fight.
It should be a really fun fight, my man. I'm really excited about that fight. Sheamuralis versus Omar Morales. How do you like this fight, man?
Yeah, this is a really tough fight to call because I think Morales is the much better fighter, but the dude's 35 years old, cutting down to 145 once again. In his last fight, he looked awful against Giga Chikadze, where Chikadze, low volume guy himself, was able to out volume Morales 2-1. So I do have some concerns in the aspect of Young. He has a decent chance of winning just by throwing more volume. Young does land 6 significant strikes per minute compared to Morales 3 significant strikes, so almost double the significant strikes there. So if Morales does not get a knockout, I really think Shane Young is live here. For me personally, I'm leaning towards that Morales knockout. I know Shane Young's a very tough guy. He was knocked out in his last fight in like the first minute against Levitt Klein. But I'm going to take Morales to win by knockout. As far as the $8,700 goes, I think it's a little steep for Morales. Somebody that you can see it there. He averages 48.4 DraftKings points. The dude does not throw many strikes at all. And you got to throw something. So unless Morales gets a first round knockout, I don't really see him scoring well. So I'll kind of be under-owned on the Morales side. And as far as Young goes, I don't see him knocking out Morales, but if he does, land a ton of volume at 7,500, I do think he can score well. So if anything, as far as the pick goes, I'm going Morales, but I'd rather pay the 7,500 for Shane Young personally.
Exactly. So before this fight, definitely be careful with this fight, though, everybody, because Shane Young has been with Volkov, which we know Volkov's off this card because of COVID. I'm surprised this fight hasn't already been called off. So just kind of stay wary of this fight possibly being taken off tomorrow. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was, honestly. But either way, I like Shane Young in this aspect of the fight. I just don't like Morales' IQ in the ring. It has not looked well from what I've seen. Like he just doesn't fight smart. I don't like that aspect of him. It scares me a ton, especially when Young is going to have the volume. I know he lets his hands go here and there, but he can push the pace for this fight and be aggressive here. And I think I'll grapple and out wrestle Morales here. That's why I'm liking Shane Young a little bit more, just because of the wrestling aspect of it. And the takedowns, Morales doesn't really go for takedowns. He's not very good at defending them either, which I think Shane Young can definitely out grapple him, like I was saying. So 7,500 for a guy who I think can get the takedown here and there, I wouldn't mind paying that at all. And I don't like Morales' price either, like you were saying. 8,700 is way too steep for him when he can go 600 more for O'Malley. So how much other go Shane Young at this fight?
Yeah, I don't hate it.
Worthy versus Malarkey. How do you like this fight?
I think this is a fight you're going to want to target on DraftKings. As far as picking a winner, I mean, this fight's pretty 50-50. Either Malarkey's going to implement those takedowns Probably find a Kama Worthy in 24 fights, has never lost by decision, 6 knockout losses, 1 loss by submission. So I think it's safe to say this fight probably does finish in some type of way. So I'm gonna have both exposure to both. I think I'm gonna be, if I'm playing 150 max, maybe like 85%, 90% combined on ownership. Probably a slight lean, honestly, to Malarkey just because of the $1,000 price savings. But I think Worthy's not the worst option in the world. If Worthy wins, it's probably by knockout. We saw Malarkey knocked out twice before. He's a tough guy. We have seen him knocked out before, and Malarkey's also very hittable. So I think both guys are live for the finish. Kind of going to split my ownership a little bit up. As far as a pick, I'm going Worthy, but this $1,000 savings on DraftKings is causing me to play a little bit more Malarkey on DraftKings.
Exactly. I think this is going to be a fight in the making. I think this could have fight of the night written all over it also, because I can see Worthy just going out for that knockout, swinging for the fences, and he's gonna go for that easily. That's what he does. I mean, he can easily, though. The problem is he's the live dog in a way that the power is there, but Malarkey also has the wrestling aspect. That's what the problem is. If Malarkey can get the wrestling and out wrestle Worthy, that's his fight to win also. So also, Malarkey's not the most powerful fighter either, which that's what scares me about Malarkey, that I'm only seeing the wrestling hit out of him. So I think this is a close fight either way. I'm liking Kama Worthy, though, as a live dog to get through that knockout and swing for the fences in this fight.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be probably one of the best fights in the card, honestly.
Exactly. So Miranda Maverick versus Robertson. We've seen this fight already happen, or supposed to happen once. How do you feel about this fight, my man?
I feel like it has potential here. I mean, you look at Robertson fights, and it's either she's scoring very well or her opponents are scoring very well. So it comes for me to think like whoever wins this fight probably scores very well. And I don't think it's going to be overly owned because it is a women's fight here. 8,800 for Maverick and 7,400 for Robertson. I really like the price savings for Robertson. But I won't ignore the upside from Maverick as well. And like I said, the winner of Robertson fights, they score well. So I'm not going to go like crazy on it, but I do think this is a fight you're probably going to want to target. I like Robertson as a underdog play, and I like Maverick as a tournament play with some upside. Going to split my exposure down. It's kind of hard to go crazy on Maverick because you got plays like Nagano, you got plays like O'Malley, like Nurmagomedov even around her, but I will have some Maverick. And as far as Robertson goes, I think she's a decent underdog play because if she does win, it's based off of takedowns, control time, all that good stuff.
So the reason why I can see Maverick possibly winning this at first glance before the first fight when they're supposed to, I liked Robertson a little bit more. But now that Maverick had that month and a half to work on the wrestling, I think that's her advantage, I think, in this fight. Because Robertson's a one-dimensional fighter who that's all she has is wrestling. That's all she's going to go for. Maverick, though, I think, like I said, she's had a month and a half to work on this takedown defense and takedowns in general. I think that's where her advantage is at because she knows the game plan of Robertson, like I was saying. 8,800, those a heavy price tag to pay for that. That's my only issue. This is more of just kind of a betting fight, in my opinion. I'm not really taking it in DraftKings. I could see Robertson, though, out grappling her and just showing why she's the better fighter because of the grappling. But then again, like I said, from a betting perspective, I'm taking Maverick. I like the Maverick side a lot more than on the DK side or the betting side. So I can see this looking like a good fight, but then again, I can see this going either way.
Yeah, I mean, if this was like 13 fights on the slate, 14 fights on the slate, I probably wouldn't play much.
Yeah.
But since there is 10 fights, you kind of got to dip in a little bit.
Exactly. Moving on to this fight. I know we have to talk about it. Go ahead and start me off. Alonzo Minnefield versus Cheerio.
So the big thing here is Minefield's 8,100 and he's minus 300 on the money line. So we're getting a ton of value. The thing with Minnefield is he's a finisher. He's finished 100% of his wins, 8 in the first round, once in the second round. And I do think he has a really good chance of knocking out Sharon here. Watching Sharon is not impressed with the guy. Sharon throws no volume. He backs up against the cage. He runs away a lot and he's hittable. So I guess the only concern I have is, first of all, I think Minnefield wins this fight. I think he wins it pretty close. I'm just worried about them kind of looking at each other too much. I think that Sharon is so low volume that I'm scared Minnefield might, go in that game plan of being low volume himself. So if this does leave the first round, I do think it kind of busts, and Minefield's going to be probably the highest owned on the slate at 8,100. So I don't know what I'm gonna do with it yet. I think you gotta play Menifield more than likely. I mean, you're minus 300, you're 8,100 on DraftKings, so I'm gonna be probably high on him. I just have some concerns that if Sharant does a lot of running away, how well could that score for Menifield? But give me Menifield. I'm gonna take him to win by first round knockout. But again, I do have some concerns with it.
That's the issue. Is in cash, he's going to be a lock of the night. If you play cash
Mhm.
games, you have to play Minifield here. Everybody's going to play him. Everybody is going to want to play him. It is what it is. If you want to be different, obviously in GPPs, you're going to try to stay away from Minifield. But personally, I think that Minifield, like you said, this is a first round knockout fight for him. Cherry on. The problem is this is on a 3 days notice. So is he ready for Alonzo Minnefield, who definitely has a resume to beat anybody here? I mean, like I said, the resume's there, but I know he hasn't been the greatest. But this is literally, look at the competition now that he's facing. The a $7,000 guy, this is his fight to win for Minnefield. This is first round or bust, like you were saying. If he does not make it, if he does not get the knockout in the first round, this fight is not optimal, in my opinion. That's the problem. Is it has to be optimal, especially now with the control time that DraftKings has. That's the big issue for me. Is how much control time does Minnefield have in this fight?
Yeah, it's you gotta go heavy on Menifield here. I just
Yeah,
don't feel great about it, but you kind of got to.
yeah, exactly. So I'm interested to see your thoughts on the Jared Goodenough fight versus Nurmagomedov. How do you feel about this fight?
I think it's interesting. I think that if Gooden wins, it's going to be some type of finish. I think if Nurmagomedov wins, it's going to be some type of decision. I don't really see him getting a finish here, but Nurmagomedov, decent wrestler. I mean, he's not Khabib or nothing like that, but decent wrestling, decent control time. And I have seen Gooden taken down a ton on the regional scene, controlled a ton on the regional scene. So I think with this new DraftKings scoring system, I think Nurmagomedov is an interesting play because we've seen with this new scoring system, it really does favor the wrestlers, the grapplers, and that's exactly what he does. So for that reason, I do have some interest. I don't think he's going to be crazy high owned because Luke is up there, because O'Malley. So I think it's a pretty good tournament play. As far as cash, I don't know if I'd go there or not. Really hard to trust the guy. We saw him get submitted in his last fight. As far as Jared Gooden goes, I mean, I'll play some because if he wins, it is probably some type of finish. I just think the more likely scenario is Nurmagomedov kind of grinding him out for 15 minutes.
So I'm interested to see how you feel about my take on this because I'm all in on Jared Gooden in this fight personally. The reason why is the number one thing he has the reach advantage. Nurmagomedov is good at wrestling also, but then again, he's not the greatest. He's no Khabib. That's what scares me. Is also look who all he's fought. He hasn't fought the greatest fighters at all. The resume is not there for Nurmagomedov. The resume just isn't the same as Gooden. Like I was saying, is he ready for the UFC? Here we go again. I don't think so. I don't think he's no Khabib. That's the problem. Everybody's going to want to think that he's Khabib, but he's not at all. Jared Gooden, he has the power, the durability that is definitely there. The chin is unbelievable for Jared Gooden. And plus, I'm going based off of heart. Who do I think is going to go out there wanting to win this fight more? I think it's Jared Gooden easily to prove himself in this fight. 7,200 for Jared Gooden. I'm all in on him. I'm like him as an underdog. I don't like the easy matchups Nurmagomedov has had. I don't like the wrestling. It's not the greatest. I'd rather go Jared Gooden, who I know is a submission artist. I know he has the heart. I know he has the durability and the chin. I'm taking all of Jared Gooden in this fight, man. I'm absolutely going to.
I don't hate it. I mean, he's 7,200. I mean, if he wins, maybe he does get a submission. He's a brown belt in BJJ. We saw Nurmagomedov get submitted before, and we've also seen Nurmagomedov lose as a big favorite more than once. So I think I'm definitely gonna have some good, and maybe not as much as you might have, but I will have like 20%, 25% good in for sure.
It's just the matchups. That's what scares me. Is the matchups that Nurmagomedov has had. It's too easy of a matchups that he's had. That's why the resume is pounded.
Yes.
I mean, exactly. 15-3, yeah. That's why. I mean, but it is what it is. How do you feel about Bukakis in this fight, my man? Last fight of the card.
Another one of those fights. I mean, it's pretty clear. I think that the Worthy Malarkey fight is going to be important. I think Stipe and Nagano is going to be important. I think this fight is going to be pretty important as well. My lean is McCall early knockout. We've seen Bukakis knocked out early in his fight, knocked out prior to that before. And McCall's going to come after it. He's going to fight for money. He's going to fight for that first round finish. And that's really what I like in a DraftKings play. So 8,500, I think if he does win, it's probably in the first round, maybe early second. Going to have a lot of Bukakis, not going to have a lot of Olazechuk. But if Oleksiejczuk cannot get that early finish, I think Bukauskas at 77 would be a decent play. Maybe he does get a late finish himself, but the majority of my lineups are going to have Oleksiejczuk in them.
Exactly. So that the problem with those outfits is that gas tank. That's my only worry is if he does not get the finish in the first round, this fight isn't optimal. But I like the first round knockout because of how aggressive he goes for it. He's gonna go all, he's gonna go balls to the wall in the first round. It's basically that's what his game plan is, to go heavy in the striking in the first round, and then if he doesn't get the first round knockout, he busts. That's where he's at. So I can see both sides being optimal. But I want that first round knockout at 8,500. I definitely want that piece of the card.
Yeah, I like it. I'm going to be pretty high on him, so hopefully he goes in there and gets it done.
Right. So basically, do you have any last closing thoughts, man, before we head out of here?
I mean, I think it's a really decent card. I know it's 10 fights. It kind of sucks, but there's some pretty solid matches on it. I think the Draftkings scores are going to be pretty high. I see a lot of finishes, and overall, we got a good card. I mean, Stipe Myokitch versus Francis Ngannou, I can't complain. Maybe it's not the best pay-per-view, but when you got the main event up top, I can't complain too much.
Exactly. So in my opinion, and this is definitely, there's a lot of 50-50 fights, so definitely just pick the side that you think is going to get the finish, in my opinion, and that's where I'm going to go also, is whoever I think is going to get the finish faster, that's where I'm going to go because of how close these fights are, my man. But I cannot wait for the main event and Stipe and Francis. That's going to be the fight in the making. That's definitely why this pay-per-view is viable, in my opinion. So that pretty much wraps up this card for us, guys. Thank everybody for tuning in, and have a good one, everybody.
See you.